Before Dave's Killer Bread, my main claims to fame were creative drug dealing and figuring out ways to do burglaries and armed robberies. I wasn't very good at any of them, but I did a lot of them. I was depressed, and I looked at life in a dark way. I thought that's just the way life was, because that is, when you see things that way, that's the way things are. There was a time when I was 38 years old, my fourth time in prison, and I asked for help. And it was the last thing in the world that you do in prison is ask for help. And I did, and it was the greatest thing I ever did. I got medication that helped me. Then I went to school for drafting. It's practical stuff like that has changed my life, that has given me hope. For me, learning a skill, learning a trade specifically, was eye-opening and exciting and made me start to develop confidence, hope, just good positive things started happening. The more I replaced my negative thoughts with positive direction, there were less negative thoughts, and eventually it was all positive, So it really is, it's practical. It was like learning to be a drafter. It seemed like it was made for me, and I just kept going in that direction. Drafting came way before the bread, and I think that's really important, that it's the drafting that made me happy. It was my first first major purpose in life, that I had this power to take something that already exists and make it better. The same thing that I did with bread was already I already was doing it as a drafter. That was 2001 when I started drafting, and I got out of prison in late 2004, basically 2005. Went to work, making bread with my family, but there was nobody there, kicking things up and making something happen, right? It was just, let's make this product for Trader Joe's and whatever that they want. So that was cool. The business was getting by, but for me, I got out with this drafting mindset, with this design mindset. But you have to know what you're trying to improve, and it can't be a vague idea. It's got to be a pretty specific idea. But for us, the opportunity was in bread. And it wasn't to make what other people were making, because those guys were already experts at that. We had to do something different. And I was a little concerned about that. I was like, that's a challenge. This is a challenge. First of all, I have to be able to reverse engineer it to a certain degree. I have to make a good product, and then I have to make it great. And through a couple months of experimenting, all the time, I would work a regular job, and then I would spend many more hours testing and doing research. And by the time I had done this for a couple months, I'd do 3 batches one time, 5 batches another time, each one with a variable. I'd have my control and my variables. And each time I learned something. I either learned this is a good idea or this is an idea that needs to be discarded. And eventually you make this good product, and then you go, wow, this is why this bread is good. I understand why this particular bread is good. And it's not just like an exchange of ingredients. It's not like, okay, I'm gonna put seeds in instead of oats. No, it's much more complex. 2 steps forward, 1 step back, the whole deal, falling down, because sometimes the bread, the product you make, you have to be thick-skinned, because somebody might say, oh man, you don't know what the hell you're doing, or they might think that. And you can't be tripping on what other people think. You just got to be focused. And I learned a long time ago that one of the greatest things you can do is fail, fail well. And my failing always led to a better product. And so after learning to make other people's stuff, I started realizing what I could do, or I would try to do, to make it a better product. And what I ended up finding out as I did this was that the product was going to cost more than other products. And in our company, there's a tendency, and most companies, the tendency is to try to save money rather than think, well, how much money can I spend? You know, so it's somewhere in between. You go, well, you don't want to be foolish about spending money, but to make a Ferrari, you don't cut a bunch of corners, you know, and so that's what we did. It was making the Ferrari of bread. And there was definitely concern. My brother, people, you know, naturally were thinking, I don't know if people will pay this. But even though it was a recession when we were growing, people maybe gave up other things, but they didn't give up their bread. So it worked. Well, I think for as far as reverse engineering and the drafting sort of mentality that I had for making bread was new to my family. Overall, it was a different philosophy than had ever happened in my company, and I think in a lot of companies. You know, it's an innovative mindset. I was never satisfied with anything for long. The thing was, once you get to, by August of 2005, which was pretty soon after I got out of prison, I had 6 varieties ready to go, 2 of which are the most popular varieties to this day, 21 whole grains and good seed. I took 4 of them to the farmer's market in August, and they were so successful that there really wasn't a lot of things I wanted to change about them, because, I mean, it was shockingly successful. It was like stupendous, you know. People were freaking out, you know. They wanted, okay, what happens after the farmer's market? Where am I going to get this? You know, so that was how we got into stores, and it was word of mouth and that sort of thing. So the challenge is, once you got a good product, even a great product, someone like me, you're always wanting to improve it. You come up with ideas to improve it, but if you change it very much, it's not the same product anymore. So I would make other products based on those recipes with different sorts of variables. At one point there were 16 varieties, and you know, they all met different needs, like diets. Like somebody wanted diet bread. I couldn't make a killer diet bread recipe-wise. It wouldn't be killer. So I decided I'd try to make them thin sliced. And to this day, the thin sliced idea is still very successful. So that's the whole thing. But I did modify recipes when I could get away with it, and you know, so that I could add a little bit of fiber, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, to make it a little better product, you know, nutritionally or whatever, without compromising taste. The idea of anything ever being finished, yeah, for me, nothing ever really is. It's a point where you can say, hey, I can accept this because right now I have to. Is this product the best that it can be right now? What am I going to do but accept it? I have to get it to market, right? And then you're like, God, I wish I'd have done this. You know, I could have made it better, but that's just not reality, right? The question of margins is a great one, because most bread companies operate on lower margins than, say, you know, some other, obviously there's, you know, tech industry and stuff has amazing margins, right? You know, the materials they use, it all depends. But in our case, we were in a tug of war between highest quality and lowest possible price. So margins were very, very limited. At first, we didn't make any money. It was like, you got to build this business up to the point where you're selling enough to reach critical mass, in a sense, where, okay, if you sell this much product, you're going to make money. And then after that happens, then you get it becomes bigger, and of course the cost of your ingredients, the other costs, your efficiencies all get better over time. And without cutting corners, see, that's something I wasn't ever willing to do, is cut corners. We always had to have the best product for the lowest possible price, so our margins were low. And I imagine they're still relatively low. They just sell a lot of bread. But there was always the concern that, okay, is this worth the extra cost in a product? Do people care about that? Okay, here's a good example. When we first had made the product, it wasn't made with all organic ingredients, because I couldn't source all organic ingredients, and the cost of organic ingredients in those days was basically an extra 50%, which is a lot. And so the question was I going to do all organic product? And to me, after wrestling with it quite a while, I was like, this is the best product out there. I have to also make it fit the profile, the highest level profile, which to me was organic, was an aspect of that. And the cost of that was going to definitely decrease margins. It was going to raise the price of the bread, and were people willing to pay for it. The funny thing was, made that choice, just had to make that choice to go organic. And one of the things I worried about was somebody coming along and doing a knockoff and making it not organic, but taste the same, and kick my butt out of the market. This is the funny thing. So many people thought it was because it was organic that made it taste so good. Even the bread designer knockoff guys, they're like, oh, it's organic. That's got to be it. 2013 was a pretty crazy year. It's a story. It's like a lifetime in itself, like a lot of my years are. This one started out great. We had just sold half the business. I had become a millionaire, which of course wasn't my deal. I didn't really care about that so much. I like the security of saying, okay, I got $1 million in the bank. I like that. So, but I was also drinking and feeling really almost like a rock star, because I'm out every day. I'm speaking and getting standing ovations. I'm drinking at the same time. I would have a drink before I go up and speak. Then I'd have a bunch more afterwards. People were able to say, "Oh, he's not what he claims to be or what everybody thinks he is." That kind of thing, and the pressure starts mounting, and eventually I did quit drinking, but I started having the pressure. I believe was what created this mind fuck that I had, where I'm getting super wound up and I'm writing all these like manifestos and all this stuff. I really thought of myself as a very important person. Now all of a sudden I'm the black sheep of the company again, right? And so you can't treat me like that. Eventually, one day, and I hadn't been drinking, but I was definitely having some issues up here, and I went into the bakery. I had been banned from the bakery for a while. One day I woke up and I said, well, I'm going in there. What are you talking about? It's my company. I walked in there to the store, to a healthy bread store up in front, at Killer Bread Quarters in Milwaukee, and there's this cardboard cutout, life-size cutout of Dave, me, there. And I never liked it anyway for some reason. I just always thought it was weird to have a cardboard cutout of myself there. So I looked at him and I go, this guy can be here. Everybody sees this guy here. It's about Dave's Killer Bread, la, la, la. I created this, and I can't be here, and he can. I punched the cardboard cutout. Doesn't make any sense, I just did it. And that was the beginning of the day for me. Things just kind of got worse after that. My wife now, she was my girlfriend then, she's driving me to Seattle, and we never quite made it to Seattle because I'm so wound up and I'm just talking crazy. I know I'm crazy, literally know I'm crazy. And we finally stopped and got a bottle of tequila, even though I hadn't been drinking. I was like, well, why not? You know, whatever this is I need to do something. So I drank a little bit of tequila, not a lot. And eventually we turned around and went back to Portland, and some friends, we went to some friends' house, and they were so freaked out about me that they called mental health in Washington County. Mental health never showed up. The cops showed up. And the cops I didn't handle it well, but, you know, I was out there. And the cops didn't handle it well either. And it turned into a disaster, you know, just a complete clusterfuck. I decided I wanted to leave that place, and the cops were waiting for me out, you know, in the streets and in this neighborhood. So I don't remember much. I pieced little bits together, but I ended up smashing into 3 cop cars. After all that happened, the cops beat the cream out of me, and I'd been beat up by cops before, so it wasn't that big a deal, but it was weird. I get beat up. Long story short, I end up in jail, and it was the weirdest mental thing I'd ever been through. I was psychotic. I'm looking out the glass from my cell, looking at a clock that says 2 o'clock, say, and then about 2 hours of pain and insanity goes by in my brain. I look out again, it's 2 o'clock, that kind of thing. I get out of jail, I get back with my girl, we're back in the house, and a newspaper article comes out in Willamette Week saying it was called Breaking Bread, and it was the first media I'd ever seen about myself that I couldn't handle. It just was like so painful to see the stuff people were saying about me. And I'm like, all this work that I've done, all these things that I've done, it all adds up to this. All the good things I've done, all the people I've tried to help, and all this stuff, and I end up like this. And the depression, the wave of depression that hit me was like nothing I'd ever experienced. And I'd been depressed many times in my life, but it had been many years since I'd been depressed. And all of a sudden I was just like a rock, I couldn't move. Thinking about, I had let down, millions of people? At least hundreds of thousands of people. By that time, there was that many people that were eating my bread and knew my story and stuff. How can this be? You know, how am I going to get out of this? How am I going to fix this? Couldn't see how I could do it. So I was depressed, really profoundly depressed for I don't know how long. And then I came out. I bounced the other direction. So I come out of the depression, which was a miracle to me because it was that bad. And then all of a sudden, now for several months, I'm on this kind of high. No drugs, no alcohol, nothing, just a high. And I'm working out. I got in really good shape. You know, all these things. I was doing a lot of good things. I was playing music with my band. It was great, but I know I wasn't quite right. You know, my mind was. It wasn't quite at the point, a sustainable, healthy point. I had one more experience where I went over the top, where it started out where I was joking around with people by my pool at my house and just clowning. That was my thing. I would be clowning around, and it seemed pretty funny to me. And, you know, all of a sudden it would go over a certain point, and then I had to sit in my chair right there and not move and not go anywhere, not get up. It was so intense, just like it was that night in the cell way back when, like several months before that. It was psychotic, but I knew it. See, having experienced it before, I knew I had to just sit there, and eventually, you know, you really feel like you can't come out of it. The way it feels is like my brain scrambled. You can't unscramble an egg, right? Well, that's how it felt. But I managed to get out of it, you know, to untwist the pretzel or whatever. It was really fucked up. And that was the last time I had anything close to that, and that was 2014. Over the next year, I had gotten very far away from the company. I was still there, but I wasn't really involved anymore. I would come in and do some quality control. I don't even remember the details of it. I was becoming more and more separated from the company and what was going on. I never really liked the corporate side of things anyway. As things get to be a certain size, and the motivations, the objectives of the company, the goals of the company end up being different. They change. They become more about growing a company for investors, you know. It changes a lot of dynamics, and it seemed like my time was kind of over. My thing was, though, I always thought that I would still be involved somehow, still have a connection to the company. But I think because of the 2013 incident, people wanted me to go away, you know. I was a unknown, I was a wild card, and I could see that it wasn't ever going to get better. Companies at that stage tend to become very careful, less risk-taking, and it was time for me to go. So that was a tough time for me. At the same time, we managed to find a big company in Georgia. They found out we were selling, and they were all over it. And Flowers Foods ended up buying Dave's Killer Bread for $275 million, and it seemed like a great success, and it was. It was an amazing success on so many levels, but it was bittersweet, if not mostly bitter for me, because the way things had turned out. It was a terrible thing to not be able to say, well, this is my company. Dave's Killer Bread really isn't my company anymore, And that's a tough thing for a creator, for a founder. And, fortunately, that didn't happen to me when I was going through a bad mental state, or who knows what would happen. I was ready for it. I prepared myself more and more. And, the money kind of was a nice cushion, And so now I wipe my ass with $100 bills and, But, just when I run out of toilet paper. Couldn't help it. I started focusing on something else. I needed to forget about Dave and Dave's Killer Bread and just be again and into something outside of me. So eventually I discovered African tribal art, which is totally makes no fucking sense. People ask me why African tribal art? What's that got to do with you? And I say nothing. That's what I like about it. I discovered it in prison when I was 38 years old, and it was the discovery of humility and acceptance and just learning to be okay with myself, and then taking that and going to school. And it was a simple, productive formula. It just worked so well, right? Just starting out with a clean mind, clean slate, kind of. Like, humility gives you that. Humility gives you the opportunity to learn. It makes you the mindset to learn. And that was the gift I received. So I went and I got that. And so from that point on, from 2001 to 2005, when Dave's Killer Bread began, I was beside myself with discovery of things, of how wonderful my life could be based on those little principles. But my brother wanted to call my bread Dave's Bread. I had a bread called Killer Bread, so it became Dave's Killer Bread. And the question was, who the hell's Dave? Now, how are you gonna call it Dave's Bread? And I mean, what's the purpose if you are not gonna say who Dave is? Well, Dave's this ex-con, just got out of prison, 4 times in prison, all this kind of stuff. I played guitar, so that was another thing. This is my identity, right? And I wrote my story on the back of the bag. Took me a couple months to write it and fine tune it. That version's way better than what they got now. But anyway, that's my opinion. And the story was heartfelt. It meant something from that. I was giving back from that moment on. I was working too hard to go be at somebody's house and one-on-one with their kid or something. But they asked me to do. People would ask me to do. They'd write me letters. I need you to talk to my son. Yeah, and I realized maybe I could talk to 20 sons at once or 50. And that was what I did. I spoke to a lot of kids that were at risk and so on and so forth. It felt good. That was my first sort of giving back. And then, of course, our company we began to find charities that seemed to matter. And what I always believed is that if you're going to do and give back and give your heart to a charity, it's got to follow something that you really feel strongly about. And for me, I felt really strong about education and meaningful education, for the person when they're ready for it. I just have my experience to work with. And a lot of times a meaningful education for a lot of people, such as myself, is practical, hands-on trades, and so that's what I got excited about, is people learning a trade that would change their lives. And so that was my kind of giving back. How can I help other people do what I've done? And then there's another investment I made, larger investment, Nucleos, not Nucleus, but Nucleos. It's a company that stated mission essentially to make it easier for people in prison to get educated. Obviously for me, it works along my passion of helping other people do what I've done, because how much I believe in education, especially for guys in prison and others who are underprivileged or disadvantaged, and how transformative it can be. Anyone in business, the best thing you can do is innovate. I mean, to me, I think there's nothing more powerful than innovation. So I want to have an effect on people where they go, oh, wow, that's cool. I want to innovate, and I know how to innovate. I know the mindset that it takes. Love the creation of what you're doing. That's important. It's not a destination. You're never going to be there, because it ain't going to be what you think it is when you get there anyway. So you just got to love what you're doing. You really have to be willing to work really hard. You really, if you don't like working hard, physically or mentally, if you don't want to be really committed and devoted and willing to sacrifice other things, don't be an entrepreneur. Work for somebody else, or be a criminal, because do something besides being an entrepreneur, because that's a hell of a commitment. People don't even get it. Oh, well, I'm going to make this and then I'm going to be rich. No. It's not like that. So you got to love what you do, enjoy the journey, and the rest comes the way as it may.